All right, next subject we got to talk about is a fight that's coming up right around the corner here, and that is Colby Covington versus Tyron Woodley, happening September 19th in the main event of the UFC Fight Night. I believe it's 11 at this point. It'll be Vegas 11. Is that correct?
One of those. Yeah.
That's right. It's one of those. Close enough. Who knows at this point? So we finally got Colby Covington versus Tyron Woodley. This is a fight that had a lot of heat to it back when Woodley was champion. It really seemed like it was an inevitable match that was going to be made for the belt when Woodley held the belt before Usman even got a shot. And then you had Covington being pulled because of nasal surgery and not taking the fight and all these other things that popped up. We're finally getting that now. And since that time, it's been a different story for both fighters, where Woodley had been looking like this dominant champion, had gone through some really tough contenders and tough fights, albeit some of them not exactly super exciting. And Covington had been just on a massive tear, running through everybody, making Robbie Lawler look awful right before his title shot. Now both of them are coming off losses. Covington's obviously closer than Woodley's last two performances against Usman and Gilbert Burns. But, first question right off the bat is, are you still excited for this fight? Are you still as hyped up?
I am definitely still excited for the matchup, because for Tyron Woodley at this point, this is the only matchup that I believe can drag out the Tyron Woodley that everybody wants to see. And everybody wants to see that slightly more aggressive, dangerous counterpuncher with the overhand punches, looking to take somebody's head off. I think that Colby Covington is going to bring that out of him, just because of all the animosity that you mentioned, in the past when they were supposed to meet up the first time. It's going to be an interesting matchup for sure on paper, based on the styles, because Colby Covington is going to pressure forward. He's going to get in Tyron's face, and he's going to make it a dogfight. And as we've seen lately, Tyron, that hasn't really turned out too well for him, right? With Gilbert Burns and, of course, Kamaru Usman, just getting in his face, taking the fight to him, and it just looked like Tyron just wasn't there for either of those fights, which is the strangest thing, right? Because you got to think back to, he's the guy that knocked out Robbie Lawler when Robbie Lawler was still super dangerous, championship material, right? And for him to just go out there and kind of just be flat, completely flat, it's really disappointing. And you kind of wonder, is he completely shot? Was there something going on, in preparation for those fights? Was he completely healthy for those fights? We don't know. We'll never really know the answer to that. But I think that in terms of this matchup, there is no better opponent for Tyron Woodley to, get amped up for in the lead up to this, to walk into the gym every day and say, oh yeah, I'm going to get my swag back on this one, sort of thing. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, Woodley has certainly not looked like himself at all in the last two fights, at least compared to the Woodley we saw against Darren Till, who, dropped Till and then submitted him, which he hadn't done a submission in who knows how long. That was, Woodley's still here. He's had some, again, people called them boring fights, but they were against very tough contenders where he had to be careful because very dangerous opponents. You had Damian Maia, you had Wonderboy Thompson twice. It wasn't a walk in the park. And against Till, he looked like a monster still. And then since then, as you said, Usman just seemed to drain the life out of him, get him up against the fence, just take him down at will. Woodley couldn't do anything there. And then against Burns, who I thought he was going to look at a minimum much better than he did. I thought he was also going to win the bout, but I had him to win. But he looked, again, just completely not there. Just got dominated on the feet, got dominated on the ground by Burns, which was surprising. So it's one of those things where if anybody can bring that old Woodley out of him, and he said, in the lead up to this fight, I'm going to let my hands go. I'm going to, bring out that old Woodley. If anybody can do it, it's certainly Covington, because like you said, Covington's going to be constantly in his face, throwing strikes nonstop. If you look at the Usman fight or the Lawler fight, pretty much every Covington fight, he's either constantly going for takedowns or constantly pressuring you with jabs and strikes. I think he had 179 significant strikes against Robbie Lawler and 143 against Kamaru Usman. He doesn't stop, and he goes for 5 rounds. So if old Woodley doesn't show up, he's in for a world of hurt. Now, obviously, leading into that, we've talked a little bit about what Woodley has to do here to get back into the game. Do you think he takes this bout, or do you think Covington's too much for him?
Man, it's hard to pick Tyron right now. It really is, based on those last 2 fights. But at the same time, what's Colby going to look like after taking that beating from Usman? We don't know, but I'm going to have to lean slightly towards Colby Covington if I'm going strictly by recent performances and how they've looked. Now, I think Tyron can win the fight. Deep down, I want him to win the fight because of, all of the other things going on outside of the cage with the two guys. Obviously, I'm riding with Tyron more than I'm riding with Colby when we're talking about personalities and things of that nature and how they choose to promote themselves and how they carry themselves. But strictly keeping it inside the cage as of late over the past 2 years, Colby Covington has looked like the better fighter. And that's just facts. Now, again, I hope that Tyron can pull it together and make this a great fight that everybody wants to see. That he's not, kind of circling on the outside of the cage with his back to the fence, kind of just waiting on a moment, because he's done that a lot in recent fights, notably in the Wonder Boy fights. We saw him just stay on the outside, even the Damian Maia fight, stay on the outside, stuffing takedowns. Wonder Boy fight, he was staying on the outside, waiting for opportunities to counter a kick or to counter a punch. He's not going to have that much time to do that in this fight. So he's got to come in there ready to pull the trigger from the moment the ref says, let's go. So if he does that, Tyron can win the fight. If he doesn't, it's going to be a long night for him because he doesn't go out. He doesn't get finished. Colby Covington will be in his face for 5 rounds. Like you said a minute ago, his gas tank doesn't empty. He can keep coming and keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. And unless if Tyron is in there from, like I said, from that minute, ready to go, it's going to be a long night in the cage for him.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's one of those things where if you look at past performances, I too have to lean Covington. And a big X factor, in my opinion, is Usman versus Covington was such a weird fight, right? Because neither one of them went for a single takedown. It was just straight up, no, we're just going to punch each other in the face and see who falls first. And in that bout, in the 5th round, obviously, Usman lands that shot that rocks Covington, breaks his jaw, causes the eventual end of the fight. But the one question is, for me, is Covington's wrestling good enough to take down Woodley like Burns's was and Usman's was? And because we never even saw Covington go for a takedown there or even attempt to see, okay, what's that look like, Usman versus Covington wrestling-wise, which we all, at least I thought that's for sure what we were going to see is a high-level wrestling match for a good chunk of the fight. Because we never saw that, I think it's a huge X factor, because if Covington's wrestling is good enough to take down Woodley, then I think if Covington gets him down and holds him down like he did against Dos Anjos or against some of these other fighters that have historically good takedown defense or have a wrestling background, then Woodley's going to get deflated. And I think if you get 1 round of Covington just grinding into Woodley, taking him down at will, Woodley struggling to get up against the fence, gets pressed there for 5 minutes, I think that's going to deflate Woodley and take all the gas out of him. And that's how the night's going to go, is constant up against the fence work and taking him down kind of at will. Is that going to happen? I don't know. And does Woodley always have that big knockout punch? Of course. But you saw it in the Burns fight. What surprised me about Woodley versus Burns was in those later rounds, Woodley threw maybe 1 or 2 big haymakers, but for the most part was just, again, done, deflated, defeated, whatever you want to call it, just kind of standing there, basically circling out, throwing a couple jabs, trying to stuff the takedown. If Woodley is too concerned about stuffing Covington's takedowns, I think he's just going to get pieced up on the feet through those jabs and those long shots. And then if Covington needs to, he'll take him down. And again, it's going to be a long night. So for me, I think Covington gets it done just based on the Woodley we've seen recently, but I also wouldn't be shocked if Woodley goes out there and murks him in the first round. I could easily see that.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. And I think it will be spent a lot against the fence. You know, a lot of that takedown attempt, kind of like grinding out style, like we were talking about in between Gaethje and Khabib. But I think that Tyron has to make him respect him early. And if he doesn't do that, then Colby's going to be in there. And I think watching the film for the Usman fight, I think Colby is going to have that in his mind that, hey, I can take this guy down and grind him out. And I think that's probably going to be the game plan leading in. But Tyron has to make him respect him early. He's got to go out there and show that he's ready to be the aggressor in the fight. And I know he's still a counterpuncher, but you can still be an aggressive counterpuncher, if that makes sense. Not just be always being on the back foot. You know, you can stop the guy from charging forward all the time. You can, you know, cut off angles and do a bunch of different things to make the guy know, hey, I'm going to counterpunch you, but I'm also not going to let you dictate every second in this fight. So that's what it's going to be for Tyron Woodley if he wants to get his hand raised and avoid dropping his third fight in a row. Yeah,
no, agreed on that count. And again, he is training now with Jorge Masvidal too. So we'll see what Woodley looks like after that. Maybe we get a running flying knee. That would be incredible. But yeah, it should be a good fight either way. I'm with you.